Hi, this is a video response to a video recently uploaded by C4Crispy. That video is quite interesting. I'm going to put the link to it in the description. He talks about rules, meta currencies, and their effect on immersion, on the immersion that you create obviously through roleplay. He has experienced some situations where the meta currency feels nonsensical or perhaps shattering when it comes to the immersion. It distorts the immersion somewhat. So he has decided to remove some things, as I understand it. He has also changed a few things. He's currently playing Weird Frontiers. That's a Dungeon Crawl Classic style of system. So if I remember correctly, he also removed the initiative system. So I think that when it comes to tabletop RPGs, and specifically the systems, you can remove, add, cut, tweak, you can do anything that you like with them. There is no perfect role-playing game. If we were to take a look at the origins of tabletop role-playing games, if we look at Blackmoor, you can see that Blackmoor is pretty much a modified version of Chainmail. And then the ideas that Dave Arneson had but couldn't put into paper, they were taken by Gary Gygax, and he came up with the fantasy game draft. Arneson did not like that draft, and later on Gary modified things further until it became Dungeons and Dragons. So you can see how even in the origins of tabletop RPGs, they were constantly modifying, tweaking things according to their own perception of what a tabletop role-playing game should be, according to them at least. So when it comes to your favorite RPG system, you already own that system. You should be able to modify it according to the experience that you and your game group are searching for. Now, when it comes to my personal way of handling things, I think those meta currencies and those other rules that could be considered an obstacle to immersion for some, in my case, I actually don't mind them or I do not think they affect immersion. I consider them part of the game because tabletop role-playing game, it's still a game. You should play things however you like. But I personally, and this is just in my case, I personally think that it's not a good idea in my case, and I am not saying that C4Crispy is doing it, but some people could be removing almost everything about the game. They could take the role-playing game and they take the game entrails and they remove them all together and they just end up with roleplay. That's it. Even in diceless, cardless systems, those games that do not use a randomizer, you still have a system of values and even resources at times. So when the characters attempt something, the game master compares their stat or their combined stats to a particular difficulty. The characters also have a chance of burning their attributes to raise their values in order to succeed in different tests. So even in those systems that do not use dice, cards, etc., there is still that game element. I think that if you remove all of the game from the tabletop RPG, you are just role-playing and you should just make up things as you go. But the game element really is non-existent in that case, in my opinion. When it comes to those meta currencies that you use fate points, I uploaded a couple of videos concerning that, altering a character's fate and whatnot. You have those bennies, fate points, destiny points, hero points, etc. They allow you to modify certain roles. In other cases, these resources, and this is actually explained by C4Crispy in Weird Frontiers, depending on your roles, sometimes you end up cursed or you obtain some sort of boon or benefit. I think that is actually perfect for Wild West games and for Weird West games, in my personal view. Because in the Wild West, there were some pretty strong superstitions. On the bad side of things, aces and eights, it is said that when Wild Bill Hickok was killed, shot from behind, when he was half blind and drunk, he had the aces and eights card combination of cards on his hand. So it is considered a very unlucky draw. Aces and eights, that's pretty bad. That's a superstition. But in that way of looking at things, you could say that it's a sort of hex mechanic. Like he made a bad roll sometimes, and now he is hexed. So he is unlucky. In the case of Wyatt Earp, he never got shot, never ended up wounded during a gunfight. All of his clothes, his coat, his, how you call them, pantaloon, pants, even his boot, they got holes, bullet holes. His boot actually had like a bullet stuck in it. He actually thought at one time that he had been shot in the leg, but his leg was actually numb because one of the shots got into the sole of his boot, so he only got that leg numb because of the shock of the impact. So you could say that he had some sort of special boon or protection. So those are those superstitions or something else perhaps. So when it comes to those meta currencies and ways of altering the fate of characters, the hexes and boons and blessings and all of that, they could be considered like that. And in Weird West, Weird Frontiers, in a Weird West RPG, type of RPG, because there is that weird element, I think it's even more justifiable. But if you want to paint things in a more realistic way, like C4 Crispy said, he mentioned that sometimes because you made a bad roll, suddenly now the non-player character's attitude towards you was a bit more stern or unfriendly. Sometimes people are very good at reading someone else's attitude. I would even consider it a smell. On the animal level, it could be a smell. Intuitively, it could be like a vibration. But for example, I've been through some very tough areas here in Mexico. Some areas where you have to move through real killers. During my martial journey, as I was training martial arts, I had to train in some really awful places where you were pretty much brushing your elbow against some very dangerous people. If you had an attitude like, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody, I just want to go through things, very meek, naive, very weak, very soy boyish, you could end up killed. That's pretty much it. They smell that in you. You could mysteriously disappear. You could get bullied. So you had to develop a certain attitude of, if you touch me, you're not long for this world. Let's put it like that. In order to keep things YouTube friendly, let's say that if you touch me, something really bad is going to happen to you, and you have to employ that attitude. So maybe when you make those rolls and the attitude of the non-player characters change towards you for the better or for the worse, maybe it's related to something in the psychology of the player character that was expressed in game terms according to that bad or good roll. Now, when it comes to the immersion breaking part, I have mentioned this in another video. I think that as long as there is roleplay, the mechanics fall through the cracks, through the gaps. They do not become noticeable. If some of you have watched my actual play with Ryan and Tyler of the Reminisce Super Smash Bros. Campaign, that game had some pretty gamey elements. We were role-playing, but you also had you could burn your resources and use special powers, etc. But it never feels like the immersion is broken. Maybe you could say that it's because of it's a video game type of environment, but I have never experienced that throughout my years in tabletop role-playing games. Even when I showed this to relatives and friends, I showed them the Reminisce actual play, and I asked, did you ever feel like the mechanics interrupted the story or something like? And they were like, no, we almost didn't notice that. And so I think that as long as there is roleplay, you can employ any sort of game mechanic, resource, etc. Now, some of you that have seen my community tab, you have seen that I am planning, perhaps when I get a bit less busy, I am planning to run a Dungeons and Dragons actual play. And because Dungeons and Dragons has some pretty gamey elements, you will see, you will further see how the mechanics are, how you say, non-intrusive. They do not damage the immersion. They are just there to handle different checks, combat, etc. And they are unnoticeable. They kind of like fade into a second plane. Roleplay is given the spotlight. So yes, those are my thoughts. In general, I think that Crispy is doing fine handling things however he likes. He should enjoy tabletop RPGs. As long as he is role-playing, he is going to be playing a tabletop role-playing game. He should be able to remove, add, tweak, etc. But in my case, I really like a lot of those gamey mechanics because I enjoy that game aspect of the tabletop role-playing game. In my case. And everyone else is free to disagree upon this. As a general advice, for those that are just getting started with tabletop RPGs, remember that you are playing a tabletop role-playing game. There is a game and there is roleplay. If you lean too much towards a certain side, I think that's fine, but sometimes the other side may end up disappearing completely. I know gamers that enjoy many role-playing games, but they play them as games, as a sort of board game, and that's it. In the best of cases. Because you know that there are some pretty awful cases, but they are not role-playing. So to me it seems a bit nonsensical that it's a role-playing game and they don't role-play. But there are others that actually are play acting. Or perhaps even storytelling, or they think that it's like a movie and they're the directors and the actors and they remove the game element completely. They are just telling a story, play acting, however you want to call it, it's not even a proper stage play or however you want to see it. And they removed that game part. In fact, you could even call it a combination of just storytelling and acting and no game. That's a better way of putting it. Not even play acting, it's more like a combination of storytelling and roleplay, and the game is tossed out of the window. Every sort of check, everything that is uncertain, they just come up with whatever they think is plausible, and that's it. Well, thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your likes and your comments. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And thank you so much to those of you that are going the extra mile to support the channel. If anyone else wishes to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Remember that today, before midnight, I am going to be uploading the next part of the Dark and Terrible campaign, starring, of course, Crispy and Josh. And always remember, it is better to roleplay and fail in character than not to roleplay and fail as a player. Once again, thank you and see you later.